Welcome back to Upfront. President Trump has ordered immigration officials to conduct a mass roundup of migrant families who have received deportation orders. Published reports say the raids could begin in major U.S. cities as soon as today. The president tweeted his intentions on this last week. He has been trying to curb the large flow of migrants at the southern U.S. border. The immigrant community here locally is waiting to see what happens, and some are concerned about it. There will be a protest march tomorrow at the ICE office in Milwaukee. We're talking now with Representative Jocasta Zamarripa, who represents a heavily Hispanic district in Milwaukee, and one of her constituents, Valeria Navarro Villegas. So thank you to both of you for being here today.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you for having us.
Valeria, I want to start with you. So I was reading, the American Immigration Council says about 7,000 DACA recipients live in Wisconsin. I know that you are one of them. Some people call this a dreamer or a kid who's brought into the country illegally by their parents. What's your story?
Yes, I was brought as a child. I was 7 years old. I came here with my mom, my two sisters who are younger, and my father had settled in Milwaukee. So we reunited with him after 2 years that we had been apart. We've grown up in Milwaukee ever since. I just graduated from Marquette University a couple years ago, and since then I've been able to work thanks to DACA, to the DACA program at a criminal defense firm in the Third Ward area, and I'm an aspiring law student, hopefully to enroll in the fall of 2020. So that's a little bit about my story, very, very summarized.
Briefly.
Yes.
And so there's still no fix for DACA right now. How does this affect your everyday life?
You know, having DACA makes me feel that I'm normal. I have a driver's license. I was able to obtain a car loan. I drive a nice car. I don't have any of those worries that my parents have day to day. But an example, last summer, my employment and authorization card was stolen, and my Social Security card, because I was carrying both of them with me, and I felt completely undocumented once again. And I had fear of driving. Even though I'm in the system, there's no way that a police officer can pull me up and know that I have an employment authorization card or a Social Security card.
So how did that make you feel?
It made me feel very anxious and hopeless because I thought I was going to lose my job. I thought that I wasn't going to be able to get a new job if I lost my job. And it made me feel what my parents feel every day. And it's very terrifying to know that they live with this day to day, knowing that they can get pulled over if they're driving to work without a license. And that's how I felt.
Under this current government, do you have hope for a solution?
Honestly, I feel that one day there will be a solution, but right now I don't see it happening. And because the DACA program is almost like a Band-Aid that's worked so well for some of us that the progress to make a solution for everyone and a permanent solution is going to take a lot longer than we would hope for. And that's how most of us feel.
Representative, I want to bring you in here. So we brought up that tweet from the president saying ICE will begin the process of removing the millions of illegal aliens. Those were his words. Do you believe him?
You know, I look at the timeline of when he made those remarks. He made those on Monday, June 17th. The next day, on the 18th, he launched his re-election campaign. I do see it as a political maneuver by President Trump. We know he launched his presidential campaign in 2016 on the backs of immigrants by calling Mexicans rapists and murderers. He has led during his entire administration thus far on a very anti-Latino and anti-immigrant agenda. And so part of me wants to believe that this is an empty political threat he made to prep for his political re-election launch. But part of me knows that there's a real fear here, and we feel it in the community.
What are your constituents saying? What's their level of concern?
Well, I believe that the biggest concern is that so many of my constituents don't know their basic rights. Whether you're an undocumented immigrant or a U.S. citizen, you might not realize you have a basic right to remain silent. And that's the information that I am always working to try to push out to the community. Know your rights. If you're stopped, if you get pulled over, if somebody knocks on the door, you don't have to open it. And that's the information that I feel, that basic info that so many of my constituents need during these dire times.
What can you do for them personally?
Well, I know that the last big immigration raid, if you recall, when ICE came into Waukesha, Madison, Milwaukee, We did hold an emergency community meeting. ACLU came to hold a Spanish language, bilingual, know your rights training. It was wonderful, very comprehensive training. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of my constituents show up that day. And again, I think because there was a fear at the time, because the raid had just happened, that we didn't want to, I think some folks didn't want to come to a congregating of what could have been another area that could have been folks could have fallen victim to a raid. So that's what I'm always struggling with, wanting to push information out to the community, but wanting them to feel safe that they can come and talk to their elected officials, their local community leaders.
And you know that there are people at home watching this saying, if you're in the country illegally, what rights do you really have? And how do you respond to that?
What I try to tell people is that that's a very simplistic way of looking at things. Our country, unfortunately, we have a broken immigration system in this country, and that is the fault of elected officials when it comes down to it.
And how do you solve that? How do you solve this at the border?
At the federal level, we need comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. It continues to languish as politicians play football there. But in the meantime, as a state representative, there are efforts that can be made. We've seen Governor Evers already show that valor by putting things like driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants into his state budget, tuition equity
Which got taken out.
Which did get gutted by a Republican majority legislature. And that's unfortunate because these are pragmatic pieces of policy that we can do in the interim while Congress continues to play political football with immigration.
Well, I appreciate both of you, your time and your perspective on this.
Thank you, AJ.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, the new chairman of the state Democratic Party and his plans for firing up the base.